I'm done preaching, and for our invitation to do Amazing Grace again, and then I think we're close to do our Fly Away again. But that'd be awesome. I appreciate it. Question for you. All right, so it was, what, 54 years ago that this church was planted here in the middle of this cornfield, right? 54, I think that's right. Isn't that right? 54 years ago. And you ever, I know the question was asked probably multiple times then. You ever asked the question, why did God plant this church here? Asked that question from time to time since then. Why did he put this church, these people together in this place? For what purpose? Why did he do that? I think it's a healthy question to ask once in a while. Okay, God, what are we here for now? I mean, you go through different seasons of life as a church, and sometimes God says, okay, now this is what I have for you to do. But that question, I think it keeps surfacing from time to time. Why did God put us here? Because I believe, without a shadow of doubt, that God has a grand plan for His church, don't you think? He absolutely does. What is our primary responsibility as the church of Jesus Christ? What is our responsibility? What's our primary? I mean, we have lots of responsibilities, yes. But what is our primary responsibility as the body of Jesus Christ? Do you know? What is it? Just shout out a few answers you think might be right. I'm not going to shoot any of you down, okay? Love our neighbor. Yeah, what else? Primary responsibilities in the Church of Jesus Christ. Spread the word. Is that what you said? Spread the word? Yeah, what else? Love our nation. Love our neighbor. Pray for our nation. Is that what you said? Yeah. Take care of others. Good. Anything that Jesus came to do, right, is our primary responsibility. I mean, you can read throughout the Gospels. Jesus even said, "This is why I came. I came to seek and what? Save the lost." Right. That was one of his primary responsibilities. He came to heal those who were sick. He didn't come for the healthy. He came for the spiritually sick. He came to heal, to seek, to save the lost. Paul tells us that ours is a ministry of reconciliation, that reconciling those who are outside of God and reconciling them back to God. Our primary responsibility is to make disciples of Jesus Christ. Our mission at Berean Christian Church, our mission is to go because Christ cares. Go where? We go up in worship. We go in spiritual maturity. We go out on mission to serve others and to evangelize and give the gospel of Jesus Christ to others, so that we can be a part of God's vision for this body here, which is to be a church for everyone. That's why He planted us here. That's why we are here. That's who we are. That's what we're to be all about. You ever feel like maybe you don't have anything to offer Jesus? On His mission, for this church, as a part of this church, do you ever feel like, I don't have much to give? Maybe some of you feel like I don't have anything of value to give to Jesus as a part of His purpose, His plan, His mission, vision here at Berean. But I guess I wonder if God would call us to this mission, why would He give us nothing to be able to give towards that mission? So we may feel like we only have a little, or what we do have is of no value. But if he's truly called us to this great task of continuing the work of Jesus Christ right here, then isn't it true that he can take what we offer and do more with it than what we could ever imagine? Or what we could ever even plan for ourselves. It's on us, it's up to us to have the courage to give, to offer to Jesus what we have, no matter how little or insignificant we believe it to be, and let him decide what he wants to do. But because he can take a little and make it. In fact, that's exactly what he did in the story that we're going to look at today. That's exactly what he did. He took this little boy who only had 5 loaves and 2 fish, and Jesus took that one little boy's sack lunch, and he fed 5,000, over 5,000 people with that one little, seemingly insignificant gift. When we put what we have in the hands of Jesus, he has all he needs to do more. Let's pray, and then we'll look in John chapter 6 together this morning. Let's pray. Our Father God in heaven, we thank you so much for what you are capable of. And what you're capable of is far beyond what we could ever imagine to even be possible. We know you took nothing and created everything. Out of your own imagination and creativity. And Lord, we ask you this morning, as we read your scripture, the story, we pray that it'll just come to life in us today. And this story from the life of Jesus will become our story as we are the body of Jesus Christ. May our lives be full of the power of Jesus overflowing. And we as his body see our little and our insignificance and possibilities in his hands. In Jesus' name. All right, so here we go. John chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. We're just going to read down through verse 6 to start with, but we'll go through verse 13 by the end here. So here we go. John chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs he had performed on the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples, and the Jewish Passover feast was near. And when Jesus looked up, he saw a great crowd coming toward him. And he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, because he already had in mind what he was going to do. I want to stop here for a moment because I think that before we can get to the finish line of the story, we've got to stop along the way at the markers and get a vision of what Jesus himself was looking at. It's kind of like when you take a trip on vacation. Isn't it better if you stop at all those little scenic stops along the way? Maybe it's a historical marker or a scenic marker. I mean, it's great to get to your destination, but it's so much more enjoyable, I think, if you stop and see all the little blessings along the way. And so maybe some of you guys are laughing and smiling. He probably was one of those, let's just get there. And you're the one, let's stop here. I just want to, we're on a time schedule here, right? Yeah, I feel it. I'm with you. Yeah. Let's just stop at the same places along the way. That's all. Stop and smell the roses as we go along. That's what we're going to do here. So let's stop and smell this rose. See what Jesus sees here. So what does Jesus see in these first 6 verses, this part of the story? What is it that Jesus sees? I think it's really simple. That's right. He saw a crowd, a lot of hungry people. Exactly. What if we had been there and Jesus asked us the exact same question that he asked the disciples? Where shall we get food to feed all of these people? How would we have answered anything? Probably is, okay, yeah, right. You think they could make enough pizzas in time for? I mean, good grief. There is no way we could feed this many people. We don't have the supplies. Making a trip to town would take way too long. By the time we fed everybody, it would. I mean, we have all sorts of excuses because when we look out, we see the crowd as a whole. And so, what is it that makes Jesus' eyes different from ours? Here's what he does. That's right. He sees the individual need, and he sees individual people where we see the big picture, and it's frightening to us. He sees more than just the whole. He has the ability also to see beyond what is physically or even scientifically possible. Remember, he's the one who, out of nothing, created everything, right? He can see beyond what we say, you know what, that is impossible. He sees beyond the physically, the scientifically impossibility. He sees something that is possible. So the question for us is, how can we begin to see the way Jesus sees? It's kind of like there's this window in our soul with the curtains drawn. We can't see out. And we have to figure out, how do we open that curtain to let God's sunlight come in and us be able to see through that spiritual window and see what God sees through our spiritual eyes. See what Jesus saw when he sees the crowd. He saw what we see as impossible. He sees as way more than possible. Only after we figure out this way to open up this curtain and let God's light in, then we can begin to see what Jesus sees with our spiritual eyes, right? If we were to open these curtains and look at the people around us, just think of your daily life as your comings and goings. If we were able to open up the spiritual curtains and look at the people around us, what would we see then? Maybe, I know I've spent a lot of time at the elementary school counseling with kids who come from hurting and broken homes, and in the schools on a daily basis. You guys see families in your neighborhoods that are hurting and in pain. Do you just see a community full of broken families, or do you see something else? Do you see kids who are desperate for somebody to love them? Do you see single moms or single dads, divorcees, separations, broken families, pain, hunger, people hungry for love and attention? What is it that you see when you see people? We've heard kids say things like, there's nothing for me here. I don't even plan on graduating high school. We hear kids say things like, I'm going to just plan on getting pregnant because that's all there is for me. I'll only be able to work at McDonald's. I can do nothing else. I'll never be anything more than than what my parents are. We can throw up our hands and say, well, it's the parents' responsibility to help them, right? Or we can see as Jesus saw. We can look through the eyes of Jesus and see a crowd of people with a need and have compassion on them. Listen, nobody can fulfill all of the needs on their own. And that's one of the brilliant things that Jesus did. Jesus didn't intend to have one person do it all. He didn't intend to just snap his fingers and everybody had food sitting in their laps, right? What he did was he brought the 12 men who were by his side together, and he said, now you take them this food, right? He brought them together, and together, it takes everyone to fulfill the needs, but it only takes one to see the need, doesn't it? It only takes one. For the sake of this generation, for the sake of the next generation, Jesus wants to be, through us, a great provider of our people. Notice the story of Anne, Smithfield, of Plymouth. He wants to be a great provider. But it takes us to be able to open that curtain and see through the window of the spiritual eyes at what Jesus sees. He needs us to see with his eyes a crowd of people that are desperate for what he can offer. We need to pray that the Holy Spirit will open our eyes to the crowd before us and move us to action. So what else does Jesus see? He saw the need. Now, verse 7, it goes on. Now, he goes on and he begins to develop and open up his plan for them. So Philip answered him, verse 7, 8 months' wages could not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Another of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. He says, here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many? Jesus said, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place, and the men sat down, about 5,000 of them. And Jesus then took the loaves, he gave thanks, and he distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish. See, he saw a need, and he saw a way to provide for that need, right? We often look at this story, though, in terms of, well, how, the miracle that Jesus performed, and we often see it as, well, what can Jesus do to provide for me? What can he do to provide for my family? What will Jesus do to provide for our church? But I want us to notice something very different in this story. Jesus did not perform this miracle alone. It began because his eyes were open and he asked a question of a group. And he didn't ignore all the naysayers, all these negative comments. He ignored all of the negativity, all of the people that said, well, we can't do it because, we can't do this because, we can't help because. And he found the solution from an unlikely source. And then he mobilized the team as one for action. God did the miracle, but he used the team through which that he worked that miracle. It's so easy to fall into the individual negative perspective trap, right? The need is too great. What can I do? What little old me, I can't do anything. I'm just a little drop in the bucket. What can I do? What can just one person who has really nothing to offer? I have no skills, I have no gifts, I have really no abilities to speak of. Who am I to do anything about this great need in our community, right? We have this uncanny ability to see the need and say, the need's too great, and I can't do anything. There's too many people that need help. It's like that guy that was walking along the seashore and just picking up a starfish, throwing it back in or sand dollar, throwing it back in in the water, but the seashore was just littered with thousands upon thousands of them, and just one at a time. And somebody came up to him and said, "Well, don't you see there are way too many for you to save them all? What good is it for you to even try?" And he said, "Ask this one whether it was worth it or not." Right? Each one becomes worth it to us. But we see that there's too many and we can't do anything. Maybe we say, "I don't have the money to help. I don't have the talent to help. I only have 5 small loaves of bread and 2 fish." I don't know. Jesus says, "Bring your 5 loaves and bring your 2 fish to me. See what I can do." See, when we bring to Jesus all we have and place it into his hands, it becomes all he wants. Here's what I'm guessing the problem can be for us sometimes. We look at a need, we look at how little we have, or how small I am, and we're overwhelmed, right? Kim and I have been, over the last couple of weeks, we've taken some days and we've been working feverishly in our house to organize and straighten up and get rid of, and because we've been married for 25 years, and any of you who've been married know that the longer you're married, the more you accumulate what? Stuff. Eventually, you have to just stop and go, "Wait a minute, this is getting overwhelming, right? We got to do something about this. Our house is not big enough, and we're not gonna move into a bigger house for all of our stuff, right? So we got to get rid of some of our stuff, or start stepping over everything we have to get around." So we decided, let's downsize our stuff and let's get things picked up, organized, get rid of whatever. The problem was, we would look in a room and be overwhelmed, right? So we had to come up with a doable solution to the problem of being overwhelmed by the amount. So the solution was, step 1, don't look at the whole, look at one part. Tackle. Step 2, tackle that small spot in the room. One spot at a time. Okay? If you look at the whole, you get overwhelmed and you quit. You look at one little area and it's doable. It becomes doable. The disciples looked at the entire crowd and they were overwhelmed. They looked at the crowd, they looked at the sack lunch. They looked at the crowd, they looked at the bag of 5 loaves, 2 fishes, and said, "No way." But Jesus looked at one person or one family and the sack lunch. That family, this lunch. And you know what he did once that gift was placed into his hands? He blessed it, and he had the 12 as a team distributed to each family one by one. When we look at our communities and see how big the need is, we can either be overwhelmed and do nothing. We can look at our little bitty church and look at how little it is, and we can either be overwhelmed and do nothing, or we can develop a doable strategy, right? Step 1, don't look at the entire community. Don't look at the entire crowd. Start seeing one person, one family, one need. Step 2, put what you have into the hands of Jesus. Let him bless it. And then see how he'll use you to move that. Step 3, look at the next spot. The end of the story, this is what happens, and this can be the end of our story as well if we will follow this doable plan. Verse 12, we pick up here. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them, filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. See, when we place in Jesus' hands all we have, no matter how little or insignificant it may seem to us, that's all he needs. He takes all we have and he multiplies it so that there are more blessings than when we started. See, God is a God of more, not less. He's always started with less, or in the very beginning with nothing, right? He's always started with less and created more. That's who he is. He sees what we cannot see and does what we could never imagine possible. So here's the question I think I would love to encourage us all to think about this week. And hopefully it'll spill into the following week and the weeks to come. Are we ready to bring our 5 loaves and 2 fishes and place them into the hands of Jesus so that he'll bless what we give and multiply it 2-fold, 3-fold, 4, 5, 6, 10-fold or more in blessings? Let's begin to see what he sees. Let him do with what we have, what he does. And let's just see what the end result will be. Because he is a God of more.